everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm here today to start my July reading wrap up, and I just finished my first book of July, which is Euphoria by Lily King. So this novel is based on some of the experiences of the anthropologist Margaret Mead and two other men, one of which may have been her husband. I'm not exactly sure to what extent Lily King extrapolated the story from them. She changed the names. So I would have to look into more of Margaret Mead's life to understand what she actually pulled from there. So these three anthropologists are in New Guinea. Two of them are married. Fen and Nell Stone are married, and they have just left a tribe that they felt that Nell struggled with, but Nell is actually the more successful anthropologist than Fen, and this is set in the 1930s, so you can imagine that the gender dynamics of their relationship are quite strained, and now I can't even remember the other guy's name. Bankson. Bankson is British, and he is studying another tribe on the same river. And they have met each other briefly before, didn't really like each other, but then they all meet again on a chance encounter on Christmas Eve, and then they feel a connection, and Bankson is able to lead Fen and Nell to a new tribe that they can study. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna change positions. Okay, so there's a lot going on in here, and there's a lot of conversations around the colonial agenda with anthropology, and the dynamics of creativity, the dynamics of study and work. So in that way, I would compare this novel to Painting Time by Mélisse de Carangal, because the focus on here is not really on the love story or the love triangle. It's about the work that they're doing and the different methods that they have, their different personalities, and how they interact with the tribes that they're living with. It's about power dynamics. It's about primitivism. It's about exoticization of cultures. There's also kind of this precursor to World War II happening with a little bit of the information. So there's a lot of interesting themes in here. The way the story is told is kind of where I struggled a little bit with it. I did really like the story, but the way the author tells it has three kind of components. The first is just a general narration. The second is a first-person narration by Bankson, who carries us through most of the story. So his first-person narration is the one that's the most dominant. And then there's another section that has journal entries from Nell Stone during the time that that she knew Bankson, that he has been given and is now reading. So the whole main perspective of the story is Bankson's, but then you sometimes are in a general narration where you're learning about Nell and Fen. So there's some allusion to abuse. There's some allusion to gender roles and switching them and how that affects people. There's a lot about tendencies, so who humans are and what they tend to be, and if you can categorize people based on that or not. So I found overall the story very interesting, and a lot of the ideas very interesting, but there was also a level of remove from, I think, some of the more poignant things that could be happening, and I kind of wish that Nell would have been the main narrator. I would have enjoyed her perspective more than Bankson's. I think that she was the strongest character in the book and could have carried it with a bit more, I don't know, a bit just for me, a bit more of a compelling way. So yeah, this was really interesting. I definitely want to learn more about Margaret Mead in some capacity at some point. And I think that the themes in here were very interesting. And I like when authors focus on a book, like focus on work, focus on someone's passion. And even the reference of Euphoria is this idea that as they're doing their work, they can hit this moment where things are buzzing perfectly and they're able to take what they're learning from the subjects that they're interviewing and living with and coalesce that into kind of pure, beautiful ideas and theory and writing. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. So that is Euphoria by Lily King, and I will check in again when I have finished another book. Hey everybody, so I just finished my second book of July, and today is only July, what day is it today? July 14th. That's really fast for me. I read this book, I think in less than a week. It was a page turner, okay? I really enjoyed this. I did a whole Fresh Reads vlog, so you can head on over there. I will link it down below and if you're interested in this, please go and watch that vlog because I go into much more detail than I will here right now with you. But, this book in a nutshell. Jake is our main character. He has a strange encounter in an airport that leads him to realize that something that happened to his best friend is not only happened to his best friend. And this sends him on a mission and on a journey to track down this mysterious woman who encounters people who then, very shortly after meeting her, die. And Jake pursues this woman. And this is the story. So you are following Jake's perspective, and then you're following the perspective of people who knew these people who were pursued by the women, telling Jake their story, recounting the story. And you're also following the woman herself as she pursues her next victim. And that's all I'm going to tell you about the story, because I found it super compelling, super readable. I had a small problem with some of the writing at the beginning in the Japan section, which I go into in more detail in the vlog. Just authors, don't use brand names to describe things. It's just not necessary, okay? That's the short version of my problem with it. But it really is only in one section that it's very evident and annoying, and then it kind of goes away for the rest of the book. I think Susan Parker is a really good writer. I am definitely going to read her novel, The Incarnations, which is mentioned here on the cover. I will most likely try to read her next book. I just think this is it was very entertaining. I couldn't stop reading it. I wanted to know what happened. I was wrapped up in the story. I was compelled to keep going. I mean, this is only the second time this year that I've read a book that's compelled me this much, I believe. So that's a great feeling. Loved it. And would recommend, if you like literary thrillers, and if you don't read a lot of thrillers, because I don't think a regular reader of thrillers would be as satisfied with this book as I was, because I don't read thrillers a lot. So it's kind of a different genre for me to jump into and to enjoy, and not something that I read a lot. So I wasn't expecting big twists and turns and big reveals, because I don't read this a lot. So, I'm not oversaturated in that feeling or that desire to have something different from what you've already read before, if that makes sense. But I think this is a character-based novel in a lot of ways. So even though the plot moves really quick, this is about character. This is about different types of people. And it's just handled really well. Susan Barker can really create compelling characters in a short period of time that you get invested in and that you want to know about. So yeah, super enjoyed it. And I will check in again with you when I have finished another book. Hey y'all. So I finished my next book of July, and that is The Electric Hotel by Dominic Smith. I listened to this on audio, and the narrator was the same narrator who narrated the other book I've read of Dominic Smith's, The Last Painting of Sarah DeVos, which I did really like. Actually, I loved that book. I gave that book 5 stars. So The Electric Hotel is multiple cast of characters, but our main character is Claude Ballard, who is a filmmaker, and he is a silent filmmaker in the late 19th, early 20th century. And he's a young man living in Paris. His sister is dying of consumption, and he is recruited by the Lumiere brothers to become one of their camera operators, who goes out and shows off these reels, and they're very short reels, and they're done by on a hang crank projector. The early days of filmmaking, essentially. And through that choice that he makes, moving from photography into film, he becomes a filmmaker. He encounters all these film actors, and then the story kind of goes from there. He has a kind of unrequited love story. He meets a entrepreneurial theater owner in New York. He meets an Australian stuntman, and they all kind of make films together for a while. And you're hearing the story in retrospect from Claude as he's telling the story kind of to Martin, who is a Texan film student who is doing his master's, and looks up Claude and finds him as he's living in Hollywood in his later years. And so the story spans, a fairly like a 20-year period, and definitely spans like the evolution of film to a certain degree, but more in the early days, not once talking and sound becomes part of movies. And there's a lot of nostalgia, but ultimately the book is really about the relationships between the characters, and I think that's something that Dominic Smith does pretty well. I will say I didn't like it as much as I liked The Last Painting of Sarah DeVos, and there were times where I did consider DNFing it because it just didn't elicit like, I really want to read this feeling. But I will say that nearing the end, which I think is typical of Dominic Smith, there was a lot of lovely connections between the characters that resolved in a really satisfying way. And I think Dominic Smith does a good job of weaving a story, and it may have been not my favorite cast of characters in combination, but overall the spectrum of the story, and The Electric Hotel refers to a film that he makes that causes basically is very controversial and has some issues. So so that's The Electric Hotel, and I think it was, overall, I'm glad I read it, but definitely would put it second under the 2 Dominic Smiths that I've read, and I definitely will read more of his work. I think I may not find one that I love as much as I loved the first one I read of his, but you never know. You just got to keep trying with authors, right? Okay, I'll check in again with you when I have finished another book. Hey everyone. Okay, so this morning I finished Monsters, A Fan's Dilemma by Claire Dederer, and I really, really enjoyed this book. This is nonfiction, memoir, but in that very perfectly blended way. I would compare it to kind of Olivia Lang or Who else? I think Olivia Lang's writing was the style that Clara Dederer's writing reminds me of the most. Sorry, I'm skipping over my words today. So, there's memoir mixed in with just like really well researched and thought through anecdotes and thoughts about different types of problematic people and their work. I think that this book just, for me, beautifully nuanced the struggles that we face as fans when we realize that people whose work we admire or love or look up to has been stained, and this is a term she uses, which I think is the perfect analogy, by their actions as human beings. And as we are all human beings and we are all imperfect, we all make mistakes, we all have the capacity to be a monster to someone. And she beautifully illustrates that here. So she covers Roman Polanski, Woody Allen, Bill Cosby, Kanye West, Virginia Woolf, Anne Sexton, Valerie Solanas, Sylvia Plath, Miles Davis, Picasso, Gauguin, like you name the people who have been, brought up over the last, 15 years or so. They're in here, and J.K. Rowling, referencing just people whose work is admired by many, but whose personal actions have been questioned, some of them have been canceled, some of them have been looked up to regardless of how bad they are, regardless of their actions. So it's all very well combined with her own personal observations on her own capacity to be a monster. She has a very interesting section around motherhood and the complexities of being a mother and being an artist, and that feeling of abandonment, like bad mothers is talked about in here, and that's a really a topic that I'm very interested in, so I love seeing that. I also love seeing the artist mother idea blended in there, because again, that's another personal connection for me. She talks about her decision to stop drinking alcohol, and how she believes that influenced her into being a monster. There's just, there's a lot in here. I think it was very well done. I mean, this is such a hard topic to write about. It's so hard to write about these things in a way that will create a discussion, as opposed to the way cancel culture tends to function in our society, which is just stop conversation. It's like makes everything into black and white. So this person did something wrong. Now we reject them and everything they've ever done completely. And that's it. If you don't reject them and everything they've ever done completely, then you are somehow complicit in their action. And that is kind of the dialogue on social media, mostly around these issues. And we need more complexity in them. We need more discussion. We need more space for people to have their feelings, and for people to negotiate how our feelings influence with everything else. So that's kind of where she's coming from here, and I thought the discussion was very well done, and I'm really appreciative that she wrote this book. And I will be talking more about this book in relation to another book, specifically around Virginia Woolf, in a Bloomsbury Diary in future, so watch out for that video, probably coming sometime in August. But I highly recommend this. I think this was really well done, and it doesn't have high ratings on Goodreads, and a lot of people are not happy with how she tackled this topic. I disagree. I think she tackled it very well, and I think it's a very timely book for what we're going through right now in the social media cancel culture, and it will help foster discussion around how to love someone's art, but also know that they as a person are problematic, and how we continue on in a society where everyone has the capacity, as she says, to be a monster, and in a society where we are trying to find a way to hold people accountable, but not discredit everything about them because of a mistake or because of actions that they've taken in their lives that other people disagree with. So anyway, really interesting discussion in here, and I highly recommend. I think I'll finish one more book before the end of the month, and I'll check in with you then. Hey everybody, so I finished my last book of July, which is We Are the Ones We Have Been Waiting For, Inner Light in a Time of Darkness, Meditations by Alice Walker. This was published, I guess, mid-2006, and it contains different essays, but more so like talks that Alice Walker gave to various organizations. And it's surprisingly relevant to today, despite the fact that it was many of the talks were written 20 years ago, which in some ways is disheartening. But this book is about hope, and it's about believing in the goodness of humanity despite difficult circumstances. And she's talking about a different, oftentimes referencing a different president in the White House, and different wars. But it's interesting how relevant it can be still, the information she shares and the perspectives she shares, how relevant it can be to today. And so one of the reasons I wanted to read this was because of kind of the way things are going politically and socially in the world right now, and it does feel very daunting to me and very bleak at times. And so I wanted to feel that kind of uplifting feeling, and I think a lot of the essays do have that in them. There are some poems included in her talks as well, and so the poems are kind of interspersed. And so I think it's a good way to kind of get an overview of Alice Walker's way of being in the world. She's much more than just a novelist. She is an activist. She's someone who is an important thinker, and she is a very open person in terms of her political perspectives and the people that she has visited with and worked with and worked towards promoting and helping. And she was part of the civil rights movement. So there's several references to Martin Luther King Jr., including, participating in his funeral. So yeah, there's a lot in here, and I enjoyed reading it, as I usually do with anything written by Alice Walker. I'll just share with you briefly a really short poem that she includes in here that really caught my attention. It's called Love is Not Concerned. Love is not concerned with whom you pray or where you slept the night you ran away from home. Love is concerned that the beating of your heart should harm no one. So yeah, I felt that was very poignant, but there's a lot more in here. So if you're looking for a little bit of hope in a time of bleakness, then I do recommend checking this out. So that is my reading for the month of July. And I want to thank you so much for watching this wrap up. and stick around if you enjoy an eclectic reader sharing her various journeys in reading. And I wrap up all the books I read every month, and I'll be back again soon with another video. Thank you so much for watching.